Hi guys, it's me, ChazRHD, and welcome to this qualifying preview for tomorrow's obviously qualifying session at the 2023 Dutch Grand Prix. Hope you guys are doing well. It's been quite an interesting day, actually, a Friday practice. A more interesting Friday practice day than we've had in a few Grand Prix. We've had some, quite surprising results from the practice sessions, a couple, little incidents during the practice sessions as well. And there is some sad breaking news that's just come out in the last, 15, 20 minutes or so as a result of one of those crashes. Don't worry, it's nothing, absolutely terrible, but it does mean that a certain driver will not be taking part any further in the Grand Prix weekend. For a certain midfield team. We'll get onto that very, very soon. But of course, in this qualifying preview, I'm going to go through what happened in practice too, look at the results, look at the data, the sector times, and who was, quick in what parts of the track. We'll also get into upgrades, because there's quite a few upgrades for a lot of the teams this weekend. We'll go into that and look at who's brought what, who's brought the most amount of upgrades, and also trying to see if I can, show any, of the new upgrades in terms of the visual upgrade, rather than just showing the confirmed FIA document that shows, this is who's brought what and for what reason. So we'll go through that tonight as well. And obviously, I'll get into my final qualifying prediction, which I'll be showing pretty soon. And then, of course, we'll get into the teams in a bit more depth, and I'll go into how I think truly their qualifying day will play out. But yeah, it has been quite an interesting day. So I think we'll just get cracking straight into it. Actually, before I do, hope all you guys are doing well. And no matter where you're watching from, what part of the world you're from, what time zone you're in, hope you're all having as best a day as possible. But yeah, let's get into the results of practice 2, which was obviously the most representative session of the Friday practice day. Lando Norris ending up on top for McLaren. Max Verstappen in the Red Bull second, only a couple hundredths of a second behind. That lap, though, that Verstappen did, to go only a couple hundredths of a second slower, I think he had done that lap on either another set of new tyres or it was on the same set of soft tyres and he just done an extra lap or two on that compound. So Red Bull definitely can go quicker, and I still think ultimately Red Bull do have the strongest pace this weekend. But McLaren are looking very good, especially when compared to Mercedes, Aston Martin, Ferrari, and the rest of the field in general. McLaren looking very good. Alex Albon up in third place. Williams have been incredible today. Was not expecting them to be quick. I said last night that I thought most likely they would have the slowest car here. I did say I thought Alex Albon would probably get into Q2 because of how well he's driving at the minute. But third in practice 2 and only a quarter of a second slower than the McLaren is an incredible effort from Albon. But that is not primarily due to Alex Albon putting in a great lap, as I'll get on to in a moment. Lewis Hamilton in P4, not too bad of a result, I would say, for Mercedes. They will be a bit disappointed to be as far away from McLaren as they were, 0.3 of a second. I think if they were only a tenth or a tenth and a half away in third place, I think they'd be satisfied with that. But yeah, 0.3 of a second away is quite a lot around this short track. And even though I do expect Mercedes to be quicker tomorrow, because normally on a Friday they are one of the teams that does hold back the most, them and Red Bull normally are the two teams that hold back the most. Ferrari to a certain extent as well. Even when I think Mercedes show their true pace tomorrow, I don't think they've got a car, even over a single lap, as good as the McLaren. So it's going to be a bit of a tricky day tomorrow. Not necessarily a bad day, but yeah, it's not going to be as maybe easy as it seemed coming into the weekend, where, I mean, personally, I thought they would be quicker than McLaren over a single lap, and then it would, swing McLaren's way in the race. But so far, it is looking very good for McLaren when it comes to quali pace, and when it came to race pace with the long runs, McLaren looking very good with that as well. Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri P5. Tsunoda has had okay or decent pace here in the past, but I was not expecting him to be top 5. I thought AlphaTauri would have a decent weekend, as I said last night, but yeah, that is an incredible lap. And Tsunoda, given his form this year, definitely someone to watch out for in qualifying. And then you got Pierre Gasly in 6th. Alpine looking, I would say, probably a tad better than I expected them to. But I don't think their pace, their good pace so far, is because of the car. I think it's really because of Pierre Gasly. Because, as you guys may remember, Pierre is incredibly quick around this circuit. Back in 2021, just a couple years ago, for AlphaTauri, Gasly qualified and finished in 4th place in what was an amazing weekend from him, and he was one of the top drivers throughout that entire weekend. So Pierre Gasly is absolutely someone to watch out for, and I think really is responsible for why Alpine were able to get a car into the top 10. Sergio Perez down in P7. To be honest, his pace is not... I mean, it's not good, but it's not terrible. It's not as bad as we've seen around this circuit before. So, yeah, it's not anything to go crazy about in a bad way with Sergio Perez. Because last year in qualifying, he was, 7/10 of a second slower than Max Verstappen. So he's already, quarter of a second pretty much quicker and closer to his teammate than he was in qualifying last year. So we can keep it at around half a second, given that Perez just doesn't like this track as much, then that would be, I think, decent enough from Perez. Lance Stroll had a good day, quicker than Fernando Alonso, just about, and ending up 8th quickest. Valtteri Bottas 9th. Alfa Romeo look decent, and they look strong-ish, as I kind of expected, but because of how good Williams, AlphaTauri and Alpine look today, they don't look as strong as I expected them to. So, yeah, that's kind of making things look worse for the Alfa Romeo team. And Fernando Alonso in the 2nd Aston Martin, completing the top 10. Only half a second covering the top 10. Of course, it is a very short track. And then the rest of the field, Charles Leclerc in 11th place. Now, with Leclerc and Ferrari, as I will point out when we get into the sector time data, that pace is not their genuine pace. Leclerc did his best time on tyres that he'd already done 3 or 4 laps on, as he had tried to do a couple quick lap attempts before his quickest run, but made mistakes and had to do, an extra lap or 2 of not out laps, but cool down laps, and waiting to build up to what he hoped to be a proper quick lap with no mistakes. So when you account for that, I think Leclerc probably could have gone a couple tenths of a second quicker, and if he was exactly, say, 2/10 of a second quicker, then he would have been in P5. So I think Ferrari's pace is actually a tad better than I expected it to be, but it's nothing special. But yeah, their pace is definitely not as bad as it seems. Carlos Sainz, I would say, his pace really does not look that good whatsoever. But in terms of the pace of the car, I don't think there's really a problem there, given that, they weren't expected to be that quick around this track anyway. So yeah, Ferrari will be a lot better tomorrow in terms of actual position. Don't worry about that if you're a Ferrari fan. Logan Sargent in P12. And I think Sargent being in P12 and also being quite high up in practice 1 as well, it confirms that even though Alex Albon, yes, is in great form at the minute, it is not, that Alex Albon being in third place is not purely because Alex Albon had a stonking lap and, just straight lined some of the corners pretty much to get up to third place. The pace is maybe not genuinely good enough for them to be fighting for third for the grid, but it's definitely good enough for the top 10. Absolutely, it's good enough for the top 10, as has been proven throughout today. Again, I do expect there to be a drop-off in pace, but I think Williams have definitely got the pace for a Q3 appearance. Just depends on the drivers delivering the laps. Got to say, though, with Logan Sargent, still way too far off his teammate in terms of lap time. Albon, 3.5 tenths quicker, which around a short lap like this is a massive amount of time to be giving up. Now you may say, well, with Sergio Perez, can't you say the same for him? Yeah, but we're not excusing Perez being horrendously slow compared to Max a lot of the time. We've criticised him plenty for that, but at least with Perez, we know that this circuit is one of his weakest, when with Logan Sargent, he's been consistently miles off his teammate the entire season. Not Alex Albon, Esteban Ocon in 13th. Even though this is not a great track for Ocon, I am surprised he's that far off his teammate, a couple tenths of a second away and down in 13th. And as well, George Russell, 14th. He will be quicker than that in qualifying tomorrow. I do expect him to be in the top 10, but his pace compared to Hamilton looks pretty bad. He is nearly 4 tenths of a second off his teammate's pace, which again, on a track this short, is a massive amount of time. Zhou Guanyu, 15th, pretty poor from him, given that he out-qualified Bottas around this track last year. Carlos Sainz, 16th, given how close Sainz and Leclerc have been on pace in qualifying a lot of the time this season, you would have expected Sainz to be, say, right where Leclerc is, if not quicker, given that Leclerc had his issues, getting in a proper good run. So, yeah, very poor from Carlos Sainz, down in 16th place. The two Haases, 17th and 18th. Haas look absolutely terrible. We will get into them there, though, later with their upgrades, because I think that's the most important thing for them. So maybe Haas are, to a degree, holding back. And then at the very back, you have Oscar Piastri in 19th, who crashed out at turn 3 during practice 2. And Daniel Ricciardo, who also crashed out at turn 3 during practice 2, right after Piastri did it. I think was distracted by Oscar's accident. And unfortunately, there has been lasting damage from that accident for the for Daniel Ricciardo. So let me just get up the tweet quickly from Formula Races, which is a great reporter of news. I'll just get up on screen quickly. So yeah, this was breaking news about, 40 minutes ago? Daniel Ricciardo, he went to the hospital because of wrist pain, and it's been confirmed that he has broken his wrist and will not compete for the remainder of the weekend. His replacement is Liam Lawson, who is luckily for Red Bull with the Red Bull team this weekend, I think, as a part of his, duties. Obviously, he's not there every weekend because he has his Super Formula, season going on. I think there's only one race of that Super Formula season left, though. But, Liam Lawson will replace him. And Ricciardo, you'd have to think, not only out of this weekend, but he's probably, I'd say I'm 95% sure he'll be out of the Italian Grand Prix as well, because that is a quick turnaround for a broken wrist. I think there's a decent chance he'll come back for Singapore, and then after that you've got Suzuka. I think Suzuka definitely, he'll be back for that. But Singapore, again, I think there's a decent chance. We have to remember, of course, we have had a driver earlier this year suffer a broken wrist. It was Lance Stroll. And Lance Stroll, I'm led to believe, broke his wrist about, what, almost a week after Valentine's Day? Like, well, it must have been, what, February the 19th, 20th, I think it was? And then he was back in the car for the first Grand Prix weekend, what, 2 weeks later? Maybe just under 2 weeks later, so... And we have to remember, Stroll was not back to 100% really until the Australian Grand Prix at the very start of April. So, not like Stroll in Bahrain was, 100%. But, yeah, that's why with Ricciardo, it's good to know, given what happened to Stroll, what sort of return timeline we can expect. So yeah, Italian Grand Prix, most likely. I think he'll miss. I'd be very surprised if he raced next week. The thing is with Singapore, which is in, 3 weeks from now, I mean, if he's like 70% fit, then yeah, or 80% fit like Stroll was back in Bahrain, then yeah, theoretically, you could... expect him to be back in the car. The thing is, though, Bahrain for Stroll was quite a good race for him to return at, because Bahrain doesn't have that many tricky corners in terms of rotation. You do have a couple tricky corners. You've got, turn 1, is it turn 10? The downhill left-hander going onto the back straight that has DRS in Bahrain. And we did actually see that Stroll was conserving his wrist through practice and driving the car differently through the slower corners to just save on, pain and not push it too hard. With Singapore, there are so many slow corners and so many corners where you require with your wrist a lot more rotation than you do in Bahrain. Bahrain at the end of the day is a power track. Singapore, you've got 25 corners? And again, a lot of them require a lot of rotation through the wrist. So I think there is even though there's a decent chance he'll return, I think there's also a decent chance he won't return. So probably a 50-50 as to whether he'll be back for Singapore. But again, Suzuka, which I know you've got the hairpin at Suzuka, but other than that, there's not much wrist rotation required compared to Singapore, because of how high speed Suzuka is. So yeah, he should be fine to return in Japan. But yeah, 50-50 for Singapore, and yeah, I'd say 95% sure I am that he'll be out next week for the Italian Grand Prix. A bit of it, well, not even a bit of a shame. It is a shame that he's going to be missing this weekend, because AlphaTauri looked genuinely quite quick, and I'd be interested to see what Ricciardo could do. But of course, has the injury. So, yeah, that's what's going on. That's the reality, unfortunately. Just needs to try and get over it as quickly as he can, get healed, and when he gets back, make sure he gets back on it. But he better hope that Liam Lawson does not go in and put an amazing performance in the next couple races. Because if he does, then I think Ricciardo's Formula One future might yet again be in trouble. Because, if Liam Lawson this weekend goes and qualifies in, 8th place or 7th place, and then even, maybe even beats Tsunoda this weekend or next weekend, or maybe even overall over the 2 weekends performs better compared to Tsunoda, even though Lawson does have the Super Formula season to complete. Red Bull would probably be interested in maybe keeping Lawson at AlphaTauri. You never know. So yeah, you better hope that Liam doesn't put in any special performances like that. I would be very surprised, though, if Liam Lawson did come in to the car and just, bang in a Q3 appearance. I'd be very surprised by that. So yeah, that is unfortunately the breaking news of Daniel Ricciardo. Hopefully he recovers quickly and we can see him back for the Singapore Grand Prix, which really you'd think is the earliest race realistically that he'll return at. And to be honest, I don't think it's that big of an issue for him to miss next weekend's race, because I think AlphaTauri are going to be terribly slow at Monza, so I don't think he'll really be that bothered about missing next weekend's race. But this weekend, definitely be a bit bothered, because AlphaTauri do actually look quite decent. But we've gone through the results of practice 2. Let me just, show you the top 10 once again, and then you can see the bottom half of the order. Let's get into, though, the sector time data to see where certain teams and drivers were quick, and see where maybe some surprise teams have been able to grab the lap time. So the first sector, which is quite high speed, really, you've only got 2 corners really to slow down for, which is turn 1 and turn 3. McLaren, surprisingly quick through that first sector, 1/10 of a second quicker than Red Bull. Again, very surprised by that, given that McLaren and straight line speed is not really their forte, but bravo to them, being the quickest team. Red Bull, of course, they are holding back compared to what they could do in qualifying. I think Red Bull always tend to hold back quite a bit more through practice than almost every team. So, yeah, I think Red Bull will definitely be a lot stronger in this sector tomorrow. But still, McLaren looking good. Williams, not a surprise they're looking so quick through there, given, again, how high speed it is. Mercedes, I think, even though I think they are probably not running as aggressively, say, as McLaren are, I think they would still be a bit concerned at being nearly 2/10 of a second off in the first sector. If they were maybe, right on the pace of the Williams in the first sector, I think they would, I think they'd be satisfied with that. But yeah, they're just losing probably a tad bit too much time in the first sector. Alpine looking actually pretty good through the first sector. Aston Martin look okay, I would say. Alfa Romeo okay. Haas, I'm surprised they're so slow, to be honest. I thought Haas would have been maybe, 1/10 of a second quicker through that first sector. AlphaTauri, not surprised. They always go better through, corners, not high-speed stuff. And Ferrari, the slowest team in the first sector. Now, as I said, when looking at their results, they did do their best lap time on a bit of an older set of soft compound tyres compared to almost everyone, so we do have to account for that. But also, Ferrari have tended to be a bit less aggressive on a Friday compared to, say, McLaren, so Ferrari can definitely go quite a bit quicker. And I think, if they did, with Charles Leclerc, if they did their best time in practice 2 with the first flying lap, rather than the third flying lap, I think it was in the end, then in the first sector, he probably would have been right there with Hamilton, if not splitting the Mercedes and Alpine teams. So I'm not really that concerned, put it that way, about the pace of the Ferrari. I will say, though, in the first sector tomorrow, really, Ferrari should be right at the top with, Red Bull, and I'd probably say quicker than McLaren, to be honest, given that, the first sector is the highest speed sector of the circuit. So, and as you'll see in the final sector, which is also quite high speed to finish up the lap, Ferrari are actually very quick through there. So, yeah, I do get the feeling that Ferrari have a lot more pace to show. I still wouldn't say, though, they're quick or as quick as, say, Red Bull and McLaren overall, but maybe a bit more. They'll show that they're a bit more competitive, or will be a bit more competitive with Mercedes tomorrow, rather than how they've been today. The middle sector, though, here at Zandvoort, is the sector that matters the most, because that's where the real corners are here that are so vitally important to your general pace. And Red Bull showing why they're clearly the superior team, despite them, being as conservative as they normally are on a Friday. They're, almost a tenth and a half quicker than the next team, being Mercedes. Got to say, though, Mercedes' Sector 2 time is actually pretty good because they're almost a tenth quicker than McLaren, which I wouldn't have necessarily expected. So good on Mercedes being as quick as they were in the middle sector. And as well, very good on AlphaTauri being as quick as they were. Third best team. That is a brilliant time from Tsunoda through there. McLaren, you'd probably expect to be a tenth quicker through the middle sector. And if there is any lap time really for them to find, looking at practice 2, going into qualifying tomorrow, you'd have to say the middle sector is the only sector really from what I've seen that they could find some extra lap time, because their pace through the first sector and the final sector is probably better than expected, you'd have to say. Alpine look okay. I mean, they are half a tenth slower than AlphaTauri, which I wouldn't say is good, but I mean, they're middle of the pack, which is not bad either. Yeah, it's absolutely okay. Alfa Romeo okay. Williams actually a bit better than expected. Right on the pace of Alpine and Alfa Romeo, and actually half a tenth quicker than Aston Martin, and a couple tenths quicker than Ferrari. Again, though, Leclerc doing his best time on a bit older tyres, which definitely would have hurt him in the middle sector, especially. And then Haas, again, terribly slow in the middle sector. 3.5 tenths slower than Alfa Romeo and Williams. I'm not quite sure why they were so bad. And then the final sector, Ferrari, the quickest team through there. So, as you saw with the first sector, whilst they were very slow through there, the slowest team, in the final sector, which is similar in certain parts, there is potential there. And really through the final sector, they're lapping at the speed that you would expect them to, given that they have such a strong power unit. McLaren doing pretty well in that final sector. Williams, no surprise with their pace, or the Red Bull pace either, or really the Mercedes pace. Aston Martin, maybe you'd say they're a tad better through the final sector than you would have thought. AlphaTauri looking actually a tad better as well. And then you've got Alfa Romeo. Alpine, I am a bit surprised they're, that far off in the final sector, given how they've looked throughout the entire lap. And then, once again, Haas F1 at the very back, as Haas, I think, have brought quite a few upgrades. So, overall, if we look at, what's happened today in practice, practice 2, really, I think we do have mostly a pecking order for qualifying tomorrow. And the pecking order I would go for, and of course I am accounting for certain teams, showing their proper pace tomorrow, because I think, again, teams like Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari are probably sandbagging a bit more than others are. Red Bull I still think are the best team. I still think they've got the best car. I do think, though, the gap between them and McLaren will be a bit shorter than I thought coming into the weekend. But still, Red Bull, I think, have got the best car. McLaren second. Mercedes, I would go third, just ahead of Ferrari in fourth. And then fifth, I would probably go Williams in fifth, because even in the middle sector, they looked pretty good, considering, it should be a really big weakness, the slower corners in the middle sector here at Zandvoort, but they still look pretty good through there. And of course, are so quick in sector 1 and sector 3. So that incredibly aerodynamically efficient car of theirs really looking strong. And yeah, I think they've got one of the top 5 best cars this weekend. And then probably Alpine or Aston Martin 6th. Yeah, they're probably 6th and 7th. And then I'd probably go AlphaTauri 8th, Alfa Romeo 9th, and Haas in 10th. It is very hard to say, really, from Williams all the way back to Alfa Romeo, where people are going to be exactly. That's where I'm most likely to be wrong, but that's how I think things look going into qualifying. And certainly, I did not, and I don't think anyone expected Williams to be as quick as they've shown. So, based off of, the data we've seen so far, let's get into my final qualifying prediction for the Dutch Grand Prix. And this prediction, by the way, I have done based on if it is a dry session. Please remember that. It is based on if it is a dry session. Let me just quickly look at the weather forecast for Zandvoort. It was actually drier today than originally forecast. And looking at the forecast for tomorrow, might be some rain in the morning before practice 3, but looks like qualifying will be dry. Hold on, let me just look at the proper weather radar. And yeah, Saturday 8 a.m. at Zandvoort might be quite a bit of rain. And probably even for practice 3, there'll be a bit of rain. But then when you go to later on, when qualifying is supposed to happen, looks bone dry. So should be a dry qualifying session. Race day, though, looks like the forecast has changed quite a bit. Looks like we might get a wet race on Sunday. Yeah, quite a bit of rain around, so that should make things exciting. Anyway, let's get into these predictions of mine. So Max Verstappen will take pole position by a bit of a smaller gap of 0.3 of a second compared to Lando Norris and the McLaren. Lewis Hamilton, I'm going in third, just ahead of Oscar Piastri. Oscar has never done a proper race weekend around here, so I still don't have enough data to really know how quick he'll be. Maybe he'll be quicker, maybe he'll be slower, we'll have to see. But yeah, I've gone with him in P4, which to be honest would be a good result for him. Charles Leclerc up in 5th, bit better than I predicted in my weekend preview last night. Sergio Perez, I'm going in 6th place, and then in 7th, I'm going George Russell. The reason I'm going with him so low down is because he looks nowhere near his teammate's pace, and that will cost him quite a bit. And then Alex Albon will be just behind in 8th place in the Williams. Carlos Sainz will be 9th in Ferrari. Also, Sainz, his pace looks terrible. That's why I think he'll be in P9. And completing the top 10, because of how incredibly quick he is around this circuit, it will be Pierre Gasly in the Alpine, meaning that in my view, I think both Aston Martins and the Alpine of Esteban Ocon will miss out on Q3, which would be quite something, but that's what I think will happen. I genuinely think over a single lap that Williams and maybe you could argue Alpine are quicker than Aston Martin. So, yeah, that's my prediction. Let me know whether you agree or disagree in the live chat. I'll get to your comments soon enough. Of course, I do have a poll running in the live chat where I've asked you guys who is most likely to challenge Max Verstappen for pole position at the Dutch Grand Prix. And the options are Lando Norris, Lewis Hamilton, Sergio Perez and Oscar Piastri. Let me know out of those 4 options who is most likely to take Max on in the fight for pole. And I'll get to that at the very end of the stream. So yeah, I'll just go back to these pictures for now. Just wanted to say quickly before we get into the car upgrades, we're going to go through that now. Just want to say quickly, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, because we've got plenty of stuff coming up this weekend. Tomorrow, live from 10:15 a.m. UK time for the Practice 3 F2 sprint race and F1 qualifying watch along. And yeah, live from 10:15 a.m. all the way through to 3:30 p.m. Again, all UK time tomorrow on Saturday. And then on Sunday, I'm doing my race preview and watch along live at 12 p.m. UK time, 2 hours before the race starts. And then I'll be live most likely until 4 p.m. So make sure to join me for all of that tomorrow and on Sunday. Of course, there won't be a Monday stream because 2 reasons. 1, Monday's a bank holiday. I think, most of you who are watching from the UK will be busy doing other stuff, which is absolutely fine. I probably will as well. And as well, given that this is the first part of a double header, we may as well do a Monday, review stream for the Italian Grand Prix instead of, this one. Plus, I'm expecting there to be probably a bit more to talk about from the Italian Grand Prix than this weekend, to be honest. But, yeah, let's now get into car upgrades. Because, of course, this is probably one of the last races where you're going to see a lot of teams bringing upgrades. So, I'll just get into that in a second. I'm just having a look quickly at something. And, yeah, let me just get it up quickly. And just to, as well, let you guys know, it's currently where I am, I think 6 minutes past 7. Obviously at night. The plan is to be done right before the Chelsea game kicks off. Of course, I do support Chelsea, so I want to watch that game. So just letting you know, in terms of this stream, I'm probably going to be live for another 45 minutes, hopefully. But yeah, we should be able to get through the rest of the stuff before then. And yeah, let me now get up on the screen the official list of upgrades. So here you go. Obviously, Albert Fabrega, brilliant journalist, has reported on this and posted the documents. So let's go through them. So Red Bull have a very small performance upgrade, a new beam wing. And it says revised cambers and angles of incidence across the elements. So yeah, very small. As you can see here, the area marked on the diagram. It's a very small upgrade for Red Bull. Helmut Marko, though, was quoted as saying earlier that Red Bull's next proper upgrade will be at Singapore, where I think Ferrari are bringing one of their major final upgrades as well. So, yeah, we'll keep our eyes on that. Mercedes have got 3 new performance upgrades, a new floor edge, side pod inlet, and beam wing. So they've got a slightly new upgrade to the floor and the side pod. I think we'll have images of that in a moment. For the floor edge, it says reduced span forward floor edge wing. And for the side pod inlet, it says decambered inboard mirror stay. And increased element camber and cord for the beam wing. So I'd say probably minor upgrade for Mercedes, but, a bit more major than Red Bull, put it that way. McLaren, their upgrades are circuit specific. Aston Martin, quite a few performance upgrades. A new floor body, floor fences, floor edge, and diffuser. This is probably the last big upgrade, you'd have to say, for Aston Martin before the end of the season. For the floor body, it says the lower surface of the floor has been modified to change the volume underneath the floor. For the floor fences, the fences have been reshaped slightly in conjunction with the main body changes. The floor edge is the same concept but adjusted to suit the floor body modification. So basically what they've done, they've redone the floor body, and then the floor fences and floor edge, they've redone obviously to go with that, because obviously incredibly important how it all interacts with one another. And then with the diffuser, it says the upper corner of the diffuser is modified to change the volume of the lower surface. A small winglet is also added behind the diffuser. So yeah, I would say this is a big upgrade, but again, probably the last proper upgrade they've got, because I know they're very keen to get on with next year's car. And then we've got Haas F1, who have got a new front wing and nose. The new front wing, it says a new arrangement of main plane, flaps, and the other component of the entire front wing is introduced for this race event. And for the nose, the development work has involved the car nose and especially the profile enclosed in the assembly. So basically a new front wing and nose for Haas. Also a new rear corner, but that says circuit specific. And then the final upgrade, AlphaTauri, a new rear wing end plate. We've seen so many times the last few races they're obsessed with upgrading the rear wing, which they believe is the main issue with their car. And for the new rear wing end plate, it says relative to the previous geometry, the rear wing end plate junction with the rear wing elements has been updated. So a small upgrade there for AlphaTauri. So really, the only big upgrade is Aston Martin, and Mercedes have a minor-ish upgrade as well. This is Mercedes. This is their new floor edge. On the top here is the new one. On the bottom is the old one. You can see it's a bit more raised, it looks to me, compared to the old one, and has a slightly different design. And when it, if you look where my mouse is, when it goes from here and then goes up, it looks a lot steeper than this one on the bottom where it's a lot more gradual. So yeah, a redesign there to the edge of the floor. Let's see. I think this is the new front wing flaps supports around here. Slight update there. Let me see if there is any other pictures I can find. Normally Albert Fabrega is the one who posts them. The ones that you really need to know about. And is this the diffuser comparison? He says Aston Martin rear brake cooling outlet and diffuser comparison. And here on the left is the new one compared to the old one on the right. Does look to be some differences for sure on this area. Down here on the bottom, you can see this area is redesigned compared to the old bit. And then, yes, some differences in the middle and the top as well. Let me see if there's anything else. I think, yeah, this is... you can see here, Aston Martin changed their engine cover with new fin and cooling outlets. You can see here with Alonso's car, the different shape compared to the old one on, which is, got Stroll's number there. So yeah, differences there for Aston Martin. And let's hope it is important differences for them. But if you look at their performance so far, I mean, I know Stroll, quicker than Alonso in practice. Maybe that means there is quite a bit more to come because, of course, normally Fernando Alonso is, the quickest driver at Aston Martin. But I've not seen anything so far to suggest that Aston Martin are, much better for those upgrades. Maybe they are, but we just haven't seen it yet. We'll have to see, of course, tomorrow when F1 truly shows what their real pace is. But yeah, those are the upgrades. We should be seeing maybe a couple upgrades here or there at Monza. Singapore, there'll probably be a raft of new upgrades for certain teams. And then we'll probably see little drips and drabs, if that makes any sense, in the final races of the season as teams try to learn more about their car going into next year, but also maybe try to improve the car a tad more to help their chances of finishing in a certain position in the championship in 2023. But now let's get into the teams and go through how I believe they will do this weekend. So we'll quickly start with Red Bull Racing. Don't look as quick as I expected. I mean, we know their qualifying pace is not the strongest part of their weekend. The race is where they really show how amazing and truly dominant they are in Formula 1. But I think it still looks good for them. When Max was properly on it and not making any mistakes, the car looked still comfortably the best car out there. The McLaren does look very good as well. I have to say that. The McLaren does look very handy around Zandvoort, but overall the Red Bull just looks very nailed to the track. There was a couple instances where there was, slight errors here or there, but I'm not sure necessarily it was because of, a problem with the car. It might have just been, slight tweaks with the setup required rather than just a fundamental issue with the car. So, yeah, Red Bull are still, they've still got the best car. Still should be at least a quarter of a second in hand for them over McLaren or Mercedes or even Ferrari if they end up magically being the second best team. So, yeah, Red Bull look great. Max Verstappen will be on pole position by a comfortable margin. Sergio Perez, yeah, his pace, it's still not good, but given how much he doesn't like this track, not looking too bad so far. And if he can qualify in the top 6, then I think that would be, given, again, his history around here, I don't think that would actually be too bad for Perez. So, yeah, a top 6 result for him would be ideal. And then, obviously, in the race, he can then, go about his business and try and get on the podium and maybe even secure a 1-2 for the Red Bull team. But Red Bull still, even though it didn't look great today, they still have definitely the best car out there. I don't think there can really be any doubt about that. Now we'll go on to the Silver Arrows Mercedes. And Mercedes don't look that bad. Again, they could be probably a tad closer to McLaren, a tenth and a half. But I don't think, really, we can be surprised massively by what we've seen, from the Mercedes team so far today. There's been other weekends this season where they've not looked that great on a Friday and ended up still having a pretty good weekend, given the problems they clearly have with this very flawed car and flawed design fundamentally that they went with. So yeah, Mercedes look fine. Hamilton obviously ended up in 4th place. I'm pretty confident he will be at least in the top 4, most likely in the top 3 in qualifying if Sergio Perez does continue to be as far off Max Verstappen as he has been so far this weekend and really for the last few Grand Prix. So, yeah, I think Hamilton, top 3, top 4, definitely something like that. But George Russell, though, his poor form just continues. We saw at Spa right before the summer break, he was terrible. He was nowhere near his teammate. He had a terrible sprint day where he even cost Hamilton a quick lap in the in the sprint qualifying, then ended up being pretty slow in the sprint race and the race itself, where he ended up miles behind his teammate and was really fighting in the midfield more than he was fighting at the front, where Hamilton was a lot of the time. And I thought coming into this weekend we would see straight away, a bit more of a feisty, more competitive George Russell, and he looks just as bad, if not worse, than he was back in Spa. And I know people may say, with Russell's performance, well, we have to remember his teammate's Lewis Hamilton, which is true. Getting beat by Lewis Hamilton is not the issue. The issue is being as far off as he is, because at the minute, he is as far off Lewis Hamilton as Valtteri Bottas was when Bottas was at his, at his absolute peak. And, when Valtteri was at his peak, he was great. I loved him. But we knew Valtteri wasn't a top driver. One of the, Hamiltons, Verstappens, Leclercs, or Vettels even at the time. We knew that. But with Russell, after what happened last season, and with the talent he has shown, that's not what we are expecting with him. So, I've got to see something tomorrow. I really do. Because if he ends up being 3-4 tenths of a second slower than Hamilton, if he does get into Q3, which will be difficult, by the way, with his lack of pace, then he's not going to be anywhere near the top 5. And he's probably going to be at best where I predicted him to be, which is P7, which would be actually, for that lack of pace, pretty good. But I could see him qualifying 9th or 10th with that lack of pace. I wouldn't be massively surprised if he was knocked out in Q2 with the pace he's shown so far. But again, I just don't get why. And I know people may say it's the change from zero pod to side pod. That meme's been going around, hasn't it, since Monaco, that he needs the car to remove, or he needs Mercedes to remove the side pods again to be quick. It cannot be as simple as that. It just cannot. Maybe, the balance, it is different, definitely, compared to how it was before Monaco when they had the zero pod concept on the car. But it can't be drastically different to the point where he's just now, miles off his teammate. I just don't. I don't accept that. I don't accept that. Because when you look at, the British Grand Prix, which was not too far, not too long ago, that is the best track, for Lewis Hamilton, his strongest circuit. But Russell, throughout the weekend, was quicker. And was unlucky, actually, not to beat Hamilton and secure a podium for himself. So, the potential is there. He just can't show it for some reason. Again, maybe there are certain things with the handling of the car that he just doesn't like. But I don't think it is as simple as, the changing in car concept. I just don't think that is the case. So, yeah. He needs to step up because, like I said, he's performing like a Valtteri Bottas right now, which is not necessarily an insult, but for someone as talented as him, he should definitely take it as one. Now, let's go on to Aston Martin. And yeah, they have brought the biggest amount of upgrades this weekend, but they don't look any better compared to what you would have expected coming into this weekend, say, if they didn't bother bringing any upgrades. So, yeah, confusing. Maybe they're just focusing on getting the setup right with those new upgrades now bolted to the car. Maybe that's what they're doing, but if it's not, and they're not sandbagging any more than your Alpines, Williamses, or Ferraris, then they're in trouble, because with the pace they've got at the minute, and you'd expect, obviously, Russell and the Mercedes to improve on how slow he was today. The two Ferraris were outside the top 10. Most likely, the two Ferraris will be in the top 10 tomorrow. If that all happens and Aston Martin keep up this level of pace compared again to Alpine, Williams, even the AlphaTauri that we saw was quicker today, then they're in big trouble. They will struggle quite a lot to make Q3, which is something I did not expect around this track. You saw my predictions on in my weekend preview yesterday. If you didn't check out the weekend preview, by the way, there is a link below to it in the description. Make sure to go check it out after this stream. I thought they'd be getting both cars into the top 10 and would be fighting with Ferrari this weekend for the last few points. But that looks like it would be not a miracle for that to still happen, but it looks very unlikely now, because I think Ferrari, once they, do a quick lap on fresher tyres, I think Ferrari are much quicker than Aston Martin around this circuit, at least when it comes to pace over a single lap. So, yeah, not good for Aston Martin. Also not great that Fernando Alonso was slower than Lance Stroll in practice, because, we knew, as I talked about last night, we know Stroll is, quick around here. We saw that last year. He had an absolutely brilliant weekend and was actually quite unlucky because he should have scored probably a few points more than he did. But given how this season Fernando has been destroying Lance Stroll, you'd expect Fernando to be at least ahead of him, even if it's close between the two. So that's a bit concerning for me as well. Because no disrespect to Stroll, if he outqualifies and outraces Fernando, great. That's great for him. Great to see him in better form. But Fernando is the better driver, and he is capable of more. So that would be a bit concerning as well, no matter what their pace is like overall for the weekend. I've got to say, looking at the long runs, I won't get officially into the long runs in terms of lap times. Let me just see if I can find them. The long run data, which I saw earlier, I think. And I can't find it now. Let me just try and find it. The reason I want to find it is because I want to just illustrate that their pace is probably not as good as, expected. Right. So let me just try and find this quickly. So, right. So Aston Martin, they did their quickest average lap time was on the hard compound tyre, which is probably not going to be the best race tyre. I think the medium will be the best race tyre. I have to remember this weekend we have the, not the three hardest compounds, but the C3, C2 and C1 are quite a hard tyre selection by Pirelli. So yeah, the medium should be the best race tyre, I think. I think the hard is probably just too hard of a tyre for this weekend. But if you look at the race pace data, Aston Martin, clearly slower than Red Bull, clearly slower than McLaren, even though McLaren did their long run on a soft compound, which should be not a great race tyre. They were on the same pace as Ferrari, which is not great, given that, again, Aston Martin did their long runs on better tyres. They were slower than Alpine. They were slower than Mercedes. And they were lapping at the same pace as Williams, even. So, point being, is in reality, Aston Martin are not quick. They are really struggling. And unless it, is proven tomorrow that actually, in reality, they were running with a bit more fuel than usual, and they do actually have an extra 2-3 tenths per second in the bag. If that's not the case, they're not making Q3 with Alonso or Stroll, and then in the race, they're going to have a tough enough time, really, to score any points, given how quick Williams look. Alpine look a tad better, really, because of Pierre Gasly. And yeah, just how competitive that midfield is at the minute. It's going to be pretty hard. So yeah, Aston Martin not looking good. Let's now go on to the Ferrari team. And yeah, Ferrari did not show today their true pace. Had some issues in practice too, making mistakes and having to do their best laps on tyres that were a bit older. Had done a bit more laps than other people had done. So yeah, Ferrari had not really got the best out of their package today, and didn't really show really what they were capable of, at least for today. I think they are probably the fourth best team over a single lap. Maybe the third best team if the drivers, rather, not the driver, if they can pull out a special enough lap, maybe they could end up as the third best team. But I think most likely they're the fourth best team going into qualifying, which, I mean, I did expect coming into the weekend, but I didn't expect them to be maybe as close to Mercedes as it looks in reality. I think once you adjust for, them running those older tyres compared to when, Mercedes did their best lap time in practice too. So yeah, Ferrari do look a tad better than expected. Carlos Sainz, I have to say, looks pretty slow. 0.2 of a second away from his teammate. On average, Leclerc and Sainz is actually the closest teammate battle when it comes to qualifying this year. Exactly 0.1 of a second separates them so far this season. So yeah, around this short of a track for Sainz to be 0.2 of a second off is quite poor. I will say though with Sainz that we do have to remember that he did not do practice one because Robert Schwartzman did practice one, because of course you have that rule in Formula One where you have to give, I think, 2 reserve drivers an outing during a practice session during the season. And of course in the second half of the season we're going to see that plenty. So maybe that didn't help. Maybe that's why he struggled. But overall, yeah, he just didn't look that good. Leclerc, again, couple mistakes here or there, but we know that normally, 85, 90% of the time when it comes to hooking a lap together, he will be absolutely fine. And I think will be, top 5 on the grid. Of course, last year was so close to pole position, was on the front row and was only, I think, 0.03 of a second away from pole, and was surprisingly close to pole position because Max, I think, if I remember correctly, through practice, Max was actually looking pretty quick. And then, Leclerc just turned up and really gave Max a real good battle. But unfortunately, was not able to get the pole position. But Leclerc has always been quick here. Like I said, front row last year, and even in the midfield Ferrari car of 2021, ended up, I think, qualifying and finishing in 5th place here at Zandvoort. So he's got good pace here, and he should be absolutely fine. Carlos Sainz, on the other hand, maybe not, and that's why I've gone with him down in P9, barely making it into the top 10. Carlos has not had a great time around here in the past, and again, so far this weekend hasn't been great either. And the final front-running team we'll go on to before I'll come to you guys in the chat quickly is McLaren. And McLaren looking quicker than I expected. I thought, again, Mercedes would be just a tad quicker than them over a single lap, but McLaren look, I wouldn't say comfortably quicker, but quicker by maybe I think in reality, once Mercedes showed their true pace, it's probably a 10th, maybe a 10.5, 2/10 at most between the two teams. And Lando Norris, of course, is on fire. He's always, when it comes to, qualifying laps, been one of the absolute superstars in Formula One, and we can expect him to put on another brilliant show tomorrow in the orange McLaren car. With obviously so much orange in the stands, you'd think it was a McLaren home race, but of course it's all for Max Verstappen. But Lando's looking great, and I can't see him not finishing in 2nd place in qualifying. And really, I think the same probably goes for the race as well. I'd be surprised if he, ended up dropping to 3rd or even outside of the top 3 because of how quick he's looking. What is a good McLaren car. Oscar Piastri, if I just get him up on screen quickly. Practice 1. Let me just see what his pace was in practice 1 quickly, because I didn't actually check officially the results. By the way, with Liam Lawson, I've just seen that his driver number will be number 40. So, for you guys that are interested in that sort of stuff, that's what his driver number will be. Of course, though, I'm pretty sure he has the yellow T-cam as Ricciardo's car, now Lawson's car. So, it should be easy to spot. I think it has the yellow T-cam. Yeah, let me just get up the results of practice 1 quickly. Yeah, Piastri was 0.2 of a second down on Lando, which is what I've predicted it to be. So, yeah, if he can get maybe within a couple tenths, maybe even get it down to 1.5, then I think that would see Oscar probably 3rd, 4th, at worst 5th if it's really close in qualifying. But I think 3rd or 4th is definitely where Piastri will be aiming in qualifying. I'd be surprised if he was really able to out-qualify Lando Norris, because Norris has the experience around this circuit that Oscar, unfortunately, does not have. But Oscar, despite his lack of experience around this circuit, still looking pretty quick, and obviously benefiting from such a fast McLaren car. Yeah, McLaren look great, 2nd best team, and they should be 2nd best team for the entire weekend, really. Yeah, looking great for the Macca team. But let me just come back to these pictures quickly and answer any questions you guys have and read out some comments from you guys. Polish Eddie says, sad for Daniel with him being out due to broken wrist. Excited to see what Lawson has to show us. Well, of course, yeah, it is sad for Ricciardo, but for Lawson, where there is an opportunity, there is a chance to show what you are made of. And that's the chance that now Liam has for this weekend and probably for next weekend as well. And if he can, like I said, put in an amazing drive somewhere and get maybe even into the top 10 in qualifying or the race, whether it's this weekend or even more amazing it would be if he did it at Monza where AlphaTauri will be slower, then it's going to get Red Bull thinking for next year and beyond. Not just when it comes to AlphaTauri, but when it comes to Red Bull. So, yeah, we will see how he does. Also, talking of that Red Bull driver situation when it comes to Sergio Perez, Helmut Marko was asked earlier about Perez and seemingly confirmed that Perez is not 100% confirmed for next season, even though he does have a contract. You may remember when I did my 2024 driver lineup analysis stream, which you can go and check out on the channel, by the way. What do you call it? I read out a quote, I think, from Christian Horner, of course, the Red Bull team boss, who said pretty much that, Perez is our guy for 2024, and if Daniel Ricciardo wants to get back into the Red Bull, then he needs to be looking at 2025. Of course, I did point out in that stream that Horner's word is not the most reliable, because he did say that Pierre Gasly would not be sacked by Red Bull, and then I think like 3 days later sacked him. So again, it's not the most reliable person. Helmut Marko is normally a more truthful person to the media. He tends to not tell the full truth, but he will allude to a lot more what the true feelings are of the Red Bull organization, Red Bull team, etc. So, yeah, he didn't confirm that Perez is going to be at Red Bull next year, and was basically emphasizing that, Perez needs to make sure he keeps performing and keeps up really what we saw at Spa right before the summer break. Darthel Raven says, hey Chazza, Norris is looking great and fast. He is, and it's great to see him looking so quick. Near Burley said, I am sad, of course. It's sad for him, have an Aussie drop out of the Grand Prix. I will say, though, that when Piastri and then Ricciardo crashed at turn 3, I initially thought that they had crashed into one another at turn 3. But, Ricciardo got caught out by Piastri being crashed because Piastri's car was sat where the cars normally will go up onto the banking to get that, great exit they do from turn 3. And he was distracted by it, lost the car, went into the barriers and made a bit of a rookie mistake and held on, I think, to the steering wheel until the car hit the barriers. And the reason it's broke his wrist is because obviously when the car, an F1 car, and really any racing car, hits the barriers, the wheel, can really gyrate quite a bit, and it can really hurt your hands, your wrist, because it can really snap when it actually hits the barrier. But also the shock wave it sends through the car can hurt quite a bit as well, from what I've heard. So that's probably what's happened, is it's hit the barrier, and not only the shock coming through the car, but him holding onto the steering wheel, it's violently moved, and then his wrist is probably just gone at an awkward angle and then just broke. It's probably a small break, I'd have to imagine. I couldn't imagine it was a massive break of the wrist. I know all about broken wrists because I have broken both my left and right wrist twice on each one, all before the age of I think 16. I think on my left wrist I broke it twice before I was 10 years old. That's basically all I was doing in the first 10 years of my life, just breaking my wrist. If you were ever wondering what I was like when I was a kid. Let me read out some more comments here. Sparky Pizza's Lewis is showing his talent compared to George ever since he stopped doing all the development testing mid-2022. George is a great driver, which makes it more impressive. True, but even when Hamilton started performing better in 2022, when he stopped trying out weird and wacky setups to try and help the team find out more about the car, Russell was still a lot closer to Hamilton consistently than he is now. At the minute, it's not even close. Hamilton is destroying him at the minute. So, yeah, it's quite staggering. Barky Pete says, I'm on delay. How can we say Albon was straightening corners, etc., but then judge that lap to Sargent, who may even had somewhat hindered laps? Devil's advocate, I guess. Well, when I said Albon was straightening corners, I was joking. I was basically, what I was saying was, it's not like Albon was so quick because he was, basically just cutting corners, or anything, ridiculous like that. Or just, happened to find the perfect grip on the track at the exact time when it presented itself. Of course, when it comes to practice sessions and even qualifying, you can't look at everybody's laps, so you can't truly know why they've ended up with the lap time they've got. So, we can only comment on what we've seen and what we know at the end of the day. Robert says, since they changed the car in Monaco, George was pretty weak compared to Ham. Mickey says, will Perez get to Q1 this time? I hope you mean Q3, not Q1, because of course everyone is into Q1. And Mickey also asking, how long will the FIA delay the cost cap findings this year? They'll probably release it at the same time they did with Red Bull, which was mid-October. The rumor still is that I think it's, Mercedes, Red Bull, Aston Martin, and maybe someone else that have violated the cap. So, we still we still don't know. Sorry, I'm just seeing a funny clip on Twitter. Hello to McLaren from Race says, hi Chazza. Do you think the FIA/Liberty will pay off Felipe Massa out of court just to shut him up, or will it be just a humiliating for him in court, considering the weak case? If you guys don't know what he's on about, Felipe Massa is taking the FIA, I think, to court to try and get the result overturned, is it? For Singapore 2008, because Bernie came out and said that that he or him and Max Mosley knew quite a while before it was revealed that Renault had, done what they did with Nelson Piquet Jr., but didn't want to, bring it all back up, so they just moved on. Obviously, it got brought back up anyway a few months after Nelson Piquet's dad, the three-time world champion Nelson Piquet, had a conversation with Max Mosley. This is all according to Max Mosley, had a conversation with Nelson Piquet Sr. in Monaco, where Nelson told Max the story, and then Max Mosley then, that's when he started the investigation. Then we found out the results of all of that, I think during August of 2009. Let me just find a Race Fans article a minute to see what the latest they have on the right, so here we go. So well, if it will eventually load, that will be great. For some reason, racefans.net is being a bit slow today. But the headline says Massa taking illegal action against FIA FOM over Crashgate. I have seen that Ferrari have been unwilling to comment on that. Of course, that was who really cost Felipe Massa the championship. So the brief report from racefans.net is Felipe Massa has reportedly commenced legal action against Formula One and the FIA over the Crashgate scandal by sending a letter before claim to both organisations. Reuters, who are very reliable, report that Massa's representatives claim he lost millions of euros in earnings after a deliberate crash by Nelson Piquet Jr., which cost him points, which ultimately resulted in him losing the championship. Bernie Ecclestone claimed in an interview earlier this year that he and Max Mosley were aware that Piquet's crash was on purpose, but not acted to avoid a controversy. I mean, to be honest, that's not much more that information than what we already knew back a few months ago when Felipe said he was considering legal action after what Bernie had said. So the thing is, I don't really see what can they do that's going to give Felipe Massa the championship, because let's be honest, that's what he's trying to do. He wants what was taken from him, but I think maybe he does deep down know that it was actually Ferrari with their fuel hose leaving it on in that race when he, left the pit stop. Maybe deep down he does accept that that was the real reason, but it's like he's trying to absolve him, not himself, but he's trying to absolve the team in that issue. But I don't see what they can do, because if they just disqualify Alonso from the race results of Singapore, Massa still would have ended up with no points, and Lewis Hamilton actually would be promoted up to second, because in the race he actually finished in third, meaning that Hamilton officially would win the title by 3 points, not 1 point, and it would actually render one of F1's greatest moments, if not the best moment in F1 history, the is that Glock moment in Brazil. It would render that useless and meaningless if that's what officially came of it. So, yeah, I don't see, and there's no way the FIA are going to void the race. That's just not going to happen, because if they void the race, then what will happen is there will be a massive outcry, and even, Mercedes might even think, well, if you've voided that race, then why haven't you voided Abu Dhabi 2021? See what I mean? You're opening a can of worms from the FIA's perspective. And I'm not saying necessarily that, what happened in Abu Dhabi 2021 was right. From a rules perspective, what should have happened is Max Verstappen should not have been allowed, obviously, to win the race, and the race should have ended under a safety car, meaning that Hamilton would have won the race and his 8th world title. But from the FIA's perspective, they want to move on from that, and they know that if they voided the Singapore Grand Prix of 2008, then they would have to address Abu Dhabi 2021. Even though Abu Dhabi 2021 is not as egregious as what Nelson Piquet Jr. did, it's still, the race result being manipulated by an incorrect decision via the rules. So I really don't see what's going to happen, other than the best case scenario is that Fernando Alonso gets disqualified from the race result. But again, that's not going to give Felipe Massa the championship. It just won't. Mickey says best case for Massa is some cash. I don't see him getting the world championship. I think, most likely what will happen is they'll settle out of court, and the FIA or Formula One will just give him a shit ton of money to shut the fuck up about it. And people, saying, he's probably going to try and, he will probably get the money from that case. McLaren from Race saying, but he carried on for several more seasons with fairly lucrative driver deals, so I don't reckon it would have made much difference. True. I mean, it's not like Ferrari got rid of him a year later. They kept with him until the end of 2013. And to be honest, they kept with him too long, because in 2012 and 2013, he wasn't... 2013, he wasn't terrible. It was the Ferrari car, really, that was the problem, but he wasn't the Felipe Massa that we saw even back in 2010, never mind 2008. So, I don't think it really cost Felipe Massa that much. What cost Felipe Massa having still a great career after that was what happened in Hungary in 2009, which definitely had an effect. I don't think as big of an effect as certain people like to make out. Because I don't think people like to make out like he was the best driver, one of the best drivers on the grid in, before that accident happened, which is not true. And Fernando Alonso, who became his teammate after that accident, Fernando was better before the Hungary accident than, compared to Massa by a comfortable margin anyway. So it's not like Felipe was, going to beat Fernando if he didn't have that accident. But anyway, let's move on. Thank you guys for the comments, and make sure as well to keep voting in that poll. The Chelsea game kicks off in just over 5 minutes, so I am going to literally just whiz through the rest of the teams. So Alpine looking a bit better than I expected. I think really it's because of Pierre Gasly. He's always been very quick here. And with Gasly, when he's on one, he is truly on one. And he can have one of those weekends where he's just stunningly quick. We saw it a couple years ago for AlphaTauri, and I'm sure if he's, enjoying the handling of the Alpine car, which it seems like he is, then there's no reason why he can't end up in the top 10. And I think he will just about get into the top 10. And the reason is, in my view, is because Alpine and Aston Martin will be pretty much level on pace, but because Gasly is quicker around this track than Stroll and Alonso and his teammate, I think that gets Gasly into the top 10. So Gasly went to top 10. Ocon will probably qualify around 13th place, where he ended up in practice 2. Williams, well, what a day. They are looking incredibly quick. They had both cars in the top 10 in practice 1, and Alex Albon was 3rd in practice 2. They look like they're on for another Silverstone-esque weekend, which is really surprising because this circuit is not really... maybe certain corners are similar to Silverstone, but this track really is not similar to Silverstone. Overall, so I have no idea why Williams are as quick as they are overall. I mean, I can understand them having decent pace in the first and the final sector, but even in the middle sector, they're quicker so far this weekend than Aston Martin and Ferrari, which doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, Williams looking great. Logan Sargent still a bit too far off on lap time. Alex Albon is in great form at the minute. He's one of the top midfield drivers in Formula 1. And with the Williams car looking good, I think he'll make the top 10, and I think he will qualify and end up in 8th place, which if he ends up there, got to think he has a pretty good chance of grabbing a couple points, which would be vital for Williams in securing 7th in the championship. For Logan Sargent, given the pace of the Williams, he has to get into Q2. He cannot afford to be knocked out in Q1. That would just be nowhere near good enough. And really, if let's say Albon is in 8th place, Logan really should be P12, P13, if Albon is indeed as quick as I expect him to be in the Williams. So, yeah, that's what I expect for Logan. But overall, I think that they will make the top 10 in qualifying once again in 2023. For Haas F1, I mean, they've got minor upgrades this weekend, but they look absolutely terrible. They're comfortably slower than the rest of the field. 17th and 18th they were. The only reason they weren't 19th and 20th is because Piastri and Ricciardo crashed out too early in the session to go on soft tyres. They look horrendous, and both of those cars, I am pretty confident, will be knocked out in Q1. And this is going to be a disaster of a weekend for Haas. Alfa Romeo, they look okay. Again, I think Williams and AlphaTauri being surprisingly good makes Alfa Romeo look worse maybe than they actually are. But yeah, they look okay. Valtteri Bottas, obviously in P9. I think it might have been in the top 10, Bottas, in practice one as well. So Bottas looks like he's having a good weekend. And with Zhou, he just doesn't look anywhere near it so far. So I really hope that he can, improve his speed. I did, though, see on Twitter a report that Zhou might now actually be at risk for his seat for next year, because apparently there might be some funding issues for the people backing him for him securing that seat at Sauber for next year, which of course opens the door. Okay, poor chair. We'll see what happens with that. But yeah, Alfa Romeo, I don't think they've got enough of a car to make the top 10, but I can see Bottas probably getting top 14 on the grid. Zhou, I think, will be knocked out most likely in Q1. And then finally for AlphaTauri, of course, such a shame that Daniel Ricciardo has his broken wrist. Liam Lawson will take his place. Going to be very interesting to see how Liam does. Thankfully, Liam Lawson does have, experience of racing around here. Raced here last year in F2. So that's great for Liam to be racing at a track that he knows and be driving a car that he's probably driven before on the simulator, you'd have to imagine, or maybe has some knowledge of. And of course, this evening we'll be getting the full brief on what he needs to do for tomorrow. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. Yuki Tsunoda was looking great earlier, up in, 5th place. Again, he's been decent here before, but that was surprisingly good from the young Japanese star. Tsunoda, I think, could be a real surprise tomorrow. Maybe even get into the top 10. But most likely, I think AlphaTauri miss out with both cars, given that you'd expect Ferrari and the Mercedes of Russell to improve. And I do think Williams are genuinely quicker than them as well. So yeah, AlphaTauri will be decent, but just not good enough for the top 10. But guys, that is it for tonight's stream. Thank you very much for coming along. Quick reminder again of what the schedule is for tomorrow and Sunday. Tomorrow I'll be live from 10:15 a.m. UK time for the Practice 3 watch-along, F2 sprint race and qualifying watch-along, live all the way until 3:30 p.m. And then on Sunday I'll be live from 12 p.m. UK time, 2 hours before the race starts, for the race preview and then the race watch-along. And I'll probably be joined by my co-commentator Niblo. And before I go, let me just quickly finish up the poll in the chat. And I asked you guys who is most likely to challenge Max Verstappen for pole position. And just about you guys have gone for Lando Norris ahead of Lewis Hamilton, with Sergio Perez in third and Oscar Piastri in fourth. Thank you very much, guys, for voting in that poll. Thank you very much for coming along to this stream. If you are new to the channel, before you go, don't forget to subscribe. It would be great to have you along on this channel. Before you go as well, guys, make sure to smash the like button. We're currently on like 19 likes. Let's try and get it up to, say, 25 if we can before the end. Make sure to follow me on Twitter as well, at ChazHD5, to keep up with content on this channel. And if you want to join our community here, make sure to join the Discord server. Great place that is for notifications for my videos and streams. And also, we have, about 500 people in the server. So it'd be great to have you a part of our community. But guys, until my practice 3 F2 sprint race and qualifying watch along, my qualifying day stream pretty much tomorrow starting at 10:15 a.m. UK time, it has been me, ChazHD. Goodbye.